Hey guys, I'm Jamie and welcome back to the channel. In this video I show you how building this Mitre Saw Station kicked my ass at every opportunity. First things first, while setting up my camera there and sorting out my hair, just let me apologise because you're actually joining me part way into this build. My camera died so I had to go out and buy a new one. While I was waiting for that to be delivered, I made a start on this project. I made a simple frame out of CLS timber and I attached it together with 50mm screws. I also attached some adjustable feet to the bottom of the frame as well because my garage floor slopes in two directions, so by installing these feet I managed to get a level base from which to build the Mitre Saw Station on. Prior to getting a new camera, I broke down 3 sheets of plywood into rough dimensions for the parts. Originally I planned to have the sides at 60cm wide, but I reduced this to 56cm and that fit comfortably within the capacity of the saw. I used a factory edge as a reference to make the first cut, and then I came back and trimmed up that factory edge to have 2 clean edges. I cut the rails at 10cm wide and I swapped my fence to the right hand side here because I think the dust extractor mount were going to interfere with the first cut. New camera, day 1. This is the reason why I can't really have anything nice. The sides were too long to put through the table saw, so I taped them together and cut them to a final width of 784mm. I marked out the location that I wanted the styles to be at, and I used the jigsaw to cut these out. I was a little bit over ambitious here, trying to cut 3 pieces of plywood with the jigsaw, and I was getting a bit of blade deflection as seen here. So I split it down into single sheets, just set up the fence at the bandsaw and rinsed and repeated the cuts. I pinned the carcass together with brad nails before drilling pilot holes and securing with 30mm screws. I always end up building something that's either way too big for my workshop or like way too big for the bench, and yeah, new workbench, first project, it's too big. But I got around that by just hanging it over the edge slightly and firing in some brad nails there. My biggest issue was that I kept on catching the light. and I made a second one of these. So to line these up, I kind of just eyeballed them because I didn't really have a straight edge to follow because the walls are curved. But I attached the carcasses to the frame with 30mm screws. I also installed these spacer blocks to keep the sides square, and then I checked between the two cabinets for square before securing to the wall with 50mm screws. And one final check for square.
Hold on, which way is it to go with?
I want that side up.
Are you sure?
Yeah. Clearly the wife remembering there from the last time that I asked her for help. So with this cut I couldn't make it by myself because I couldn't reach the full length. So the wife helped me out here, and I just had to give her a quick crash course in the use of a circular saw. Very good.
Oh, I'll be back.
Yeah. All right.
Right, I'm going.
Thank you. She's a good one. I cut the top down to rough length, but looking back here, I could have actually cut it down to final length and saved myself a job later on. To attach the tops to the cabinets, I use these L brackets with some 12mm screws. I also drove in some 30mm screws through the front stiles there, straight into the top. And this is where I could have saved myself a bit of time there from prattling about by cutting the tops down to final length earlier on. I was careful to not cut through that cable here because yes, that cable is live, and if I'd have cut through it, that would have made for having a bad day. I could have been a lot more safer by just going to the fuse box and cutting off the power to the cable, but you know, I'm lazy. But seriously, it's better to be safe. First pocket holes of the project. River. Yes, lad. Hey, next one. He's totally going to come back in 15 years saying I owe him some money for these videos. The mitre saw was sitting a little bit low, so I just cut these shims out of plywood, and that brought the saw bed up so it was level with the cabinets at either side. And I secured the top with 1-inch pocket screws. That worked. To install the drawer slides then, I clamped up a spacer and used 12mm screws. The spacing for the drawer runners, I just kind of winged it just so they would be roughly in the middle of where the drawer sides were going to be. For the drawers, I actually dismantled some old drawers that I made. These were just a little bit too deep, so I cut the drawer size down to a final width of 15 centimeters. Before cutting the drawers down to final length, I first had to attach the Mitre Saw to the base. To do this, I took several reference measurements, so I knew that the saw was going to be in line with the cabinets. I also checked that I had full range of motion around the saw, and this would be for a future dust hood build, as well as giving me the most amount of space available to sit the saw back. Now the bolts that I had weren't quite long enough, so I just had to make a wider hole with a spade bit, and that allowed me to get a wrench in and tighten the saw down. I could then cut my first drawer down to final width, set up a stop block, and then rinse and repeat the remainder of the cuts. Next I cut out the drawer bases. These were also out of 18mm plywood. I moved the fence to the right hand side again here because if you see the overhang, that would run into the mount for the dust extraction hose at the opposite side. Before committing myself to assembling all the drawers, I just assembled one at first, and this is so I could do a test fit of the drawer, make sure that it fits. So to assemble it, I tacked it with brad nails before drilling pilot holes and assembling with 30mm wood screws and 1-inch pocket screws. I used a spacer for the bottom drawer, and that was just to lift the drawer off the base. With the fit confirmed, I could then move on to assembling the rest of the drawers. I was having a little bit of trouble with the right side drawers engaging that soft close mechanism. There must have been a slight bow in the plywood, so I added some shims behind the back of the runners to see if that would work, and that worked great.
Drawers are easy when you know what you're doing.
And when you don't, you spend nearly an hour trying to problem solve. Next I could move on to cutting the drawer fronts out of my final bit of plywood. I measured and cut the drawer faces oversized so I can trim them down at the table saw afterwards. That's the first time in 4 years that's happened, and I think it's because the plywood wasn't supported in the middle and it pinched the blade. So what's the first thing you do after a scary kickback like that? Check that you've got enough material left. With the plywood cut into more manageable pieces, I cut out the drawer fronts at the table saw. For both sets of drawers, I used a continuous grain pattern. I originally used two 30mm screws to attach the drawer fronts to the drawers, but later on I came back and added a couple more screws. I also tried imprinting the screw locations onto the drawer faces. I wasn't a really big fan of this method. I think with the next set of drawers that I make, I'll just use a double-sided sticky tape.
What I'm going to do is just shim the drawer runner up slightly, and that should then hopefully bring the bottom part of the drawer in. I got this tip from the I Build It channel.
So that spacer was a little bit thick and it's reversed the gap towards the top end now, but I can live with that because it's out of sight. Motherfucker! With the drawers finished, I could turn my attention to finishing the tops. I left this little overhang on the corner which I removed with a pull saw. I then used a 80 grit to finish off the MDF edges. I also sanded the plywood edges as well. Final bit then was just to add the support piece under the saw to prevent it from sagging, and this was attached with 1-inch pocket screws. With that part attached, I could fill my drawers and call this part of the project complete. And I gotta say, I'm proper happy to have this setup back. I've so missed this setup from like 9 months ago when I ripped my original workbenches out with the intention of doing this. I've got so much storage now with these 6 drawers. It's just eliminated a lot of the stuff that I had just lying around. And we're moving the setup to the opposite side of the workshop. It's eliminated the bad habit that I had of crossing my hands over whilst using the Mitre Saw, which a few of you have pointed out. So the Mitre Saw Station isn't complete. I do want to build a dust hood around the saw, and that's to keep the sawdust at bay. I've got to add 2 cupboard doors at either end, and I want to add a T-track scale, all of which will be available in a future build. And if you want to check that out, I'd proper appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Let me know down in the comments below if you're building something like this, and if you've got any tips to share. I do read every comment and I appreciate your input. But yeah, that's it for this video guys. Thanks for tuning in and watching. See you in the next one.